My gob was well and truly smacked this morning when I saw the report that Sky News have done into what Elon Musk has done to Twitter, and indeed continues to do for the far right. I touched on it yesterday. I've mentioned it to you on quite a few occasions, but from a very anecdotal perspective. From very much my own personal experiences. And, of course, as we often observe on this programme, the plural of anecdote is not data. And it is data that Sky News' data and forensic team have been digging into. And now we're going to find out a little bit more about exactly what it is that they've done. Tom Cheshire is the Sky News correspondent, and you will be across this. You'll understand, Tom, that I think I've done a little bit more than scratch the surface, but give my listeners an idea of precisely how much effort has gone into this and what the sort of headline discoveries are.
Yeah, it sort of starts from the idea, the suspicion that a lot of people have that X has become more right-wing since Elon Musk took it over. And, he took it over because he wanted to get rid of what he called the woke mind virus. You might sort of have that inkling, that sensation, but we didn't have the data. So for the last 9 months, we've been trying to get that data. What that has involved is setting up sort of box-fresh new accounts, each with different political leanings, letting them run for, weeks, and then taking all that data, sort of 90,000 posts, and then using, that's where it gets a bit technical, but using a sort of AI tool, an LLM, to classify that data and understand what's right-wing, what's left-wing, what's extreme content, what's non-extreme content. So getting all of that, hundreds of thousands of data points by the end, and coming up with the conclusion that actually it does look like the X algorithm, for whatever reason, is boosting right-wing content. So if you're a neutral user, or the average user of all our accounts, they got sort of 62% of everything they saw was right-wing content. So not a 50-50 split or anything like that. If you're a left-wing user, you still saw a lot. And if you're a neutral user, these are accounts we set up to be non-political. So they follow, Sky Sports or entertainment accounts, things like that. And our investigation found that all these accounts, they were still getting a majority of right-wing content.
So the algorithm is not delivering to people stuff that they are likely to enjoy, unless they're right-wing, in which case they're getting a preponderance of very right-wing content. But people who, whether they identify as such or not, but people whose conduct online identifies them as leaning leftwards or being liberal, they are receiving a disproportionate amount of right and far-right content as well.
Yeah, everyone's getting more right-wing content than you'd necessarily expect. And then it goes the same for the other way. So if you're a politician and you look at who does well from the algorithm, you get someone like Kemi Badenoch, for instance. She's actually, for how often she posts in her sort of size of audience, she's about where you'd expect in terms of engagement. But you get other people, Rupert Lowe, for instance, real outlier on this. He gets a huge amount of engagement. Some of that's because Elon Musk engages with him directly, and that's always a big boost. He's somehow ended up as the most followed account on X. But this does seem to be across the board. We can't say why it's happened or how it has exactly happened. It might be something to do with the incentives in X, which tend towards more extreme content these days anyway. But yeah, this is a really sort of long-running UK-focused experiment. We think it's the first of its kind, certainly for the UK. And it does seem to be pretty stark. The right-wing content is boosted and that extreme content is boosted by the algorithm.
And of course, one of the first things he did was put people back on the platform who'd previously been banned for extremism and racism, and indeed conduct that was criminal, or certainly borderline criminal. So no one is necessarily going to be shocked by this, but they will be surprised by the granular detail of the work that you and your colleagues have undertaken. And I fully appreciate that you're not, unlike me, you're not in the business of personal opinions, but might you expect more politicians to join the likes of Ed Miliband and Ed Davey in describing this as a genuine threat to democracy? Because if you are seeking to gaslight, groom, or simply manipulate a population, and Elon Musk has already called upon people in this country to sort of attack each other in the street, then you are polluting democratic discourse.
Yeah, I think it all comes down to free speech, right, and how that's defined. I think there's different things going on. So when he reinstated people like Tommy Robinson or Katie Hopkins giving them their voice back, as they said, that's one thing. It's a different thing for the algorithm to prioritize content, especially when it presents itself as quite a neutral thing. We're used to very rich people controlling media, being a feature, and on the left as well. You buy a paper, you know where it's coming from ideologically. The difference with X is that it presents itself as sort of a digital town square. Actually, it is private property still, and there's free speech on it, but Elon Musk is deciding how free that speech should be, how far it should travel. So I think that's the sort of difference there. And when it comes to the interference point, Elon Musk has taken a very, very active interest in UK politics. He was speaking at that Tommy Robinson rally, as you mentioned. This is, when it happens elsewhere, people are very quick to decry billionaires, perhaps a trillionaire, interfering in other people's politics. We haven't seen that for Ed Davey. He spoke to us about it. He's warned about this, Ed Miliband too. We haven't seen it more from the right-wing parties, perhaps because they are benefiting from it. We've spoken to some of those right-wing parties who said, he's given us our voice back. We don't get a fair shake of the stick on mainstream media. So without Musk, we wouldn't be able to recruit. I think there's fairness to that as well. But it also means you get a very different sort of politics, I think. Ben Habib, who was formerly of Reform, we spoke to him, and his party now is happy to take Tommy Robinson, for instance, as a member, which is probably something that Reform wouldn't do, that the Conservatives wouldn't do. That's a very different sort of politics, and that's the sort of politics that Musk has enabled himself.
I mean, they have a point, of course. The Telegraph, the Times, the Sun, the Express, the Daily Mail, these are all quasi-Marxist organs that are constantly going after right-wing parties and right-wing politicians with full-throated condemnation. So I think we can all agree on the poignancy of their plight. Does it... And I think I will push you for a personal opinion on this, because, as I say, you've dug into more of it than I've had time to so far. Does it, do you think, make a case for the government to act?
Yeah, it's a great question. I'm always really sceptical of government regulation. But when you think of what we are bound by, say, at Sky News, as a broadcaster, is, always there, and it regulates media. It's a different regime for the press, obviously. But I think the idea that algorithms can just sort of not be audited or not have that transparency about them, I think it's pretending to be something that it's not. If you're pretending to be neutral, I think there should maybe be some sort of neutrality that people sign up for. And they have shown willingness to work with other places. So, in Germany, they have very strict laws around hate speech, and that content disappears very quickly. We've seen content taken down in Turkey when the ruling party there has asked for it to be taken down. Free speech seems to be less of an issue for Elon Musk. Now, he does have a particular obsession with the UK. We have a different tradition of free speech than America does. But he sort of tends to elide the two. I am really, really wary of government regulation because it can quickly become censorship. But I think it's clear that unless it's sort of packaged differently and said, look, this is how the algorithm works, then look, it's going to be a right-wing place. Fine, go to Blue Sky. There are other venues if you don't want that. Or they're non-political venues. Go on Threads, which is a mad social media experience, not very political. Maybe it just needs to be boxed up as such and flagged as such. But arguably, I would say it's also what we're here to do, right, is to point it out and sort of confirm those suspicions, have that data so that if you are signing up to X, you know what you're signing up to.
Yeah. That sort of tops and tails it quite neatly. Final question then. You spoke to some former employees of what was previously Twitter, and what did you learn from them?
Yeah, I mean, I think it was Twitter's been on a journey, right? Like a lot of technology, it had that optimism to it. It was a nice place to hang out. You had the Arab Spring and everyone's like, well, this is social media. It's going to free the world. Things got quite dark along with Facebook, sort of Cambridge Analytica story. And they said when Musk took over, though, is getting rid of the content and the moderation teams, which was a really, really big shift. And the other thing that happened as a result of that is that Facebook, Meta rather, was very happy to do the same. Now that one person's gone, we don't have to pay all these people to stop genocides happening around the world. It's a free speech carnival. So I think that's been a really big shift, and it's gone beyond X as a result. This is across the internet, across social media. So I think they're pretty disappointed at where it's gone. But just to counteract, if we've got a little time for it, Twitter before, I think probably had a problem when it came to censorship. It would go too far. The Hunter Biden story, for instance, I think Twitter executives now agree they shut that down because they were burned from last time what had happened when Donald Trump got removed from it. So a lot of critics would say Twitter had a liberal bias before, and now that's being corrected. That's what Elon Musk would say as well. I think there's some truth to it, but we've ended up in a different situation. I think it's a very rapidly changing situation. I don't think we've seen such an effect on British politics.
Well, and also that it was never the case that people on there expressing avowedly right-wing or far-right views within the boundaries of what was permitted and what was not, they would never have their feeds full of people like me, which they would never have their feeds full of liberal-leaning accounts, whereas liberal-leaning people now have their feeds full of right-wing-leaning accounts. That's a sea change. That's a profound change, and it doesn't. There's no balance there between the past and the present.
No, I'd agree with that, and I think some of that is, again, I don't know what's happening behind the scenes.
Of course.
In terms of the algorithm has been changed, but the incentive structure with it being a monetizable platform now, extreme views, inflammatory stuff gets more views, it gets more money for creators. There's real incentive there to put out that more extreme content. So I think that's some of the story here as well, rather than just a sort of political bias.